The global reaction to Modi's unprecedented security warning. What happens when the leader of 1.4 billion people stands up and tells the world to prepare for danger? That single moment, if it ever arrives with full force, could send shockwaves through capitals on every continent within hours. This is a forward-looking exploration of how such a moment could unfold, built on the direction India's global influence is already heading. India's global weight has grown so large that even a hypothetical warning from its leadership now carries the power to move markets, alliances, and militaries. Stay with us, because understanding how the world might react reveals just how much influence India has quietly built over the past decade. Let us imagine this scenario together, step by step, and examine why the reaction could be unlike anything the world has seen before. To understand why a security warning from India's leadership would matter so much, you first need to understand how much India's global position has changed. A decade ago, statements from New Delhi rarely dominated global headlines the way announcements from Washington, Beijing, or Moscow instantly did. Today, that balance has shifted considerably as India's economy, military, and diplomatic reach have expanded into nearly every corner of the globe. India now sits at the center of major economic groupings, defense partnerships, and regional security dialogues that stretch from the Pacific to the Middle East. Any serious warning from India's top leadership would no longer be treated as a regional statement. It would be read as a signal with global consequences. Analysts across multiple continents track Indian policy announcements far more closely now than they did even 5 years ago, aware of how much weight they can carry. This shift did not happen by accident. It happened because of years of deliberate economic growth, military modernization, and expanding diplomatic influence. Every major summit, every trade agreement, every defense partnership signed over the past decade quietly added another layer to India's global standing. So when we imagine a moment where Modi issues an unprecedented security warning, we are imagining a moment the entire world would be forced to take seriously. Picture the immediate aftermath of such a warning, the first few hours after the statement reaches global newsrooms and government offices simultaneously. Financial markets, always sensitive to uncertainty, would likely react within minutes, with investors scrambling to understand exactly what kind of threat is being described. Currency traders, energy markets, and stock exchanges across Asia would likely see immediate volatility, given how deeply intertwined global trade has become with Indian markets. Neighboring countries would almost certainly convene emergency briefings, trying to determine whether the warning touches on border security, terrorism, or a wider regional conflict. Western capitals, increasingly reliant on India as a strategic partner in the Indo-Pacific, would likely issue quick statements of solidarity or concern within the same day. This is the pattern global crises tend to follow, a wave of immediate reaction driven by uncertainty, followed by a slower, more careful diplomatic response over following days. For India, a country that has spent years building credibility on the world stage, the tone of that first global reaction would matter enormously. A single mishandled hour of confusion could shape headlines for weeks, while a calm, clear response could reinforce years of carefully built trust instead. Diplomatic channels would likely become intensely active in the days following such a warning, with embassies working around the clock to gather clarity. Foreign ministries in major capitals would likely request urgent briefings from Indian officials, eager to understand the scope and seriousness of the situation being described. Allied nations, particularly those with deep defense and trade ties to India, would likely move quickly to express public support while privately assessing their own exposure to risk. Rival or competing nations, meanwhile, might respond far more cautiously, watching closely to see how the situation develops before committing to any public position.
International organizations, including regional security forums and global bodies focused on peace and stability, would likely schedule emergency sessions to discuss the implications. This flurry of diplomatic activity reflects just how interconnected global security has become, where a warning from one major power ripples outward almost instantly. No single country today can experience a serious security event in isolation, and India, given its current global standing, would be no exception to that rule. Behind closed doors, ambassadors would likely exchange notes late into the night, trying to piece together a fuller picture before their own governments spoke publicly. Media coverage would likely explode almost immediately, with news organizations around the world racing to cover every possible angle of the unfolding story. International broadcasters would likely interrupt regular programming to cover the warning live, bringing in defense analysts, former diplomats, and regional experts to offer instant analysis. Social media would almost certainly amplify the story within minutes, spreading both accurate information and, inevitably, a wave of speculation and misinformation alongside it. This is one of the more challenging aspects of any modern security event, separating verified facts from rumors spreading faster than officials can respond to them. Governments would likely face pressure to clarify details quickly, aware that public panic or confusion could cause as much disruption as the original warning itself. Indian officials in this scenario would carry the difficult responsibility of balancing transparency with the need to avoid revealing sensitive security details publicly. How that balance is handled would likely shape international perception of India's crisis management capabilities for years afterward. News anchors around the world would likely repeat the same phrase in different languages, trying to explain why a statement from India suddenly mattered to everyone. Regional neighbors would face some of the most immediate and direct pressure to respond, given their geographic proximity and shared economic and security interests. Countries sharing borders or close trade relationships with India would likely convene their own security councils, assessing what precautions might be necessary on their end. Some nations might quietly increase military readiness along shared borders, a common and cautious response, even when the exact nature of the threat remains unclear. Trade and logistics companies operating across South Asia would likely begin contingency planning, aware that regional instability could disrupt supply chains extending far beyond India's borders. This ripple effect illustrates just how deeply India has become within regional and global economic networks over the past several years. A warning affecting India would rarely stay contained within India alone, given how many countries now depend on stable trade and security relationships with the country. This interconnected reality is precisely why analysts increasingly treat Indian security developments as matters of genuinely global rather than purely regional significance. Even small nations far from South Asia, whose economies quietly depend on Indian trade routes, would likely feel the tremors of such a moment. Major global powers would likely respond with carefully worded statements designed to express concern without appearing to overstate or dramatize the situation. The United States, given its deepening strategic partnership with India, would likely offer public support while coordinating quietly through established defense and intelligence channels. European nations, increasingly focused on diversifying trade and security partnerships away from traditional dependencies, would likely express solidarity while closely monitoring any economic implications.
China, given its complex and often tense relationship with India, would likely respond with a measured, cautious statement, watching closely for opportunities or risks depending on the situation's nature. Russia, maintaining long-standing defense ties with India, would likely express support while carefully avoiding any statement that could complicate its own broader international relationships. Japan and Australia, both increasingly aligned with India through shared regional security frameworks, would likely move quickly to signal unity and coordination. Each of these responses would reveal as much about each nation's own strategic priorities as it would about the actual situation unfolding in India. This is often how major global reactions unfold, shaped as much by each country's own strategic interests as by genuine concern for the situation itself. Beyond governments, international businesses and multinational corporations would likely respond with their own forms of quiet, careful contingency planning. Companies with significant operations, supply chains, or investments in India would likely activate risk assessment teams, evaluating potential impacts on their operations and personnel. Airlines and shipping companies might adjust routes or schedules depending on the nature of the warning, prioritizing passenger and cargo safety above all other considerations. Technology companies with major operations inside India would likely activate crisis communication plans, reassuring employees and clients while awaiting further clarity. This corporate response, while far less visible than government statements, often plays an enormous role in shaping the practical economic consequences of any major security event. A warning serious enough to disrupt business confidence can create economic ripples that persist long after the original security concern has been resolved or clarified. This is one of the less discussed but deeply important dimensions of how the world would likely respond to a scenario of this magnitude. Public reaction within India itself would likely play a defining role in shaping how the rest of the world interprets the entire situation. A calm, coordinated domestic response would likely reassure international observers, signaling that the country's institutions remain stable and firmly in control of the situation. Panic or visible disorder, by contrast, could dramatically amplify international concern, regardless of the actual scale or nature of the underlying threat itself. Indian media, social platforms, and public commentary would likely become a critical source of real-time information for international observers trying to understand the unfolding situation. This places enormous responsibility on domestic institutions to communicate clearly, quickly, and accurately, both to their own citizens and indirectly to the watching world. Officials in this scenario would need to walk a careful line, providing enough information to maintain public trust without creating unnecessary panic or confusion. Ordinary citizens watching the same broadcasts as international observers would likely become an unintentional part of the story themselves, their calm or their fear shaping the global narrative. How well that balance is managed would likely become one of the defining factors shaping global perception of India's overall resilience and institutional strength. Security cooperation between India and its partner nations would likely intensify sharply in the immediate aftermath of such a warning. Joint intelligence sharing arrangements, already active between India and several allied nations, would likely see a significant surge in urgent, real-time communication. Military attachés stationed in New Delhi would likely find themselves at the center of intense activity, relaying information back to their home governments around the clock. Some nations might offer direct assistance, whether through intelligence support, technical resources, or public statements of readiness to help if requested.
This kind of rapid mobilization reflects years of quiet groundwork, defense agreements, and joint exercises that have steadily built trust between India and key global partners. Without that groundwork already in place, this level of coordinated international response would simply not be possible on such short notice. This is one of the quieter but more important lessons hidden inside this hypothetical scenario, that alliances built patiently over years become invaluable during moments of sudden crisis. In the days and weeks following such a hypothetical warning, attention would likely shift from immediate reaction toward longer-term strategic implications. Defense analysts would likely study the situation closely, looking for lessons about regional stability, alliance structures, and the evolving nature of modern security threats. Diplomatic relations tested during the crisis would likely either strengthen or weaken, depending on how effectively each nation responded during the most critical early hours. India's own standing on the world stage could shift significantly, either reinforcing its growing reputation as a stable, responsible global power or raising new questions about regional vulnerabilities. Trade agreements, defense partnerships, and diplomatic alliances negotiated in the aftermath could reflect lessons learned from how the situation was ultimately handled and resolved. Universities and think tanks around the world would likely publish detailed case studies dissecting every stage of the response for years to come. This is often how major geopolitical moments unfold in the real world, less about the initial event itself and more about the choices made in its aftermath. A single warning, handled well, could ultimately strengthen India's global standing rather than weaken it, turning a moment of crisis into a demonstration of capability. It is worth pausing here to consider why this kind of scenario feels increasingly plausible rather than purely theoretical in today's world. India's defense budget has grown steadily over the past decade, funding modernization efforts across its Army, Navy, and Air Force simultaneously. Its diplomatic network has expanded into new regions, building relationships that would have seemed unlikely or unnecessary only 20 years earlier. Its economy has grown large enough that disruptions within India can now visibly affect global supply chains, energy markets, and international trade flows. Each of these developments, individually, might seem like a slow, incremental change, unlikely to draw much global attention on its own. But together, they form the foundation of a country whose words now carry weight far beyond what they once did. This is precisely why a scenario like the one we have imagined here no longer feels like distant fiction, but like a plausible extension of trends already well underway. This scenario, while a forward-looking projection, reflects something very real about India's current position within the global order. The country's growing economic weight, military modernization, and diplomatic influence mean that any serious security statement from its leadership would now carry genuine international consequences. This represents a profound shift from earlier decades, when India's domestic security concerns rarely commanded this level of sustained global attention. Understanding how the world might react to such a moment offers a valuable window into just how significant India's rise has become on the world stage. It is a reminder that influence is not only measured by economic output or military strength alone, but also by how closely the world listens when a nation speaks. As India's global role continues to expand in the years ahead, moments like this may become less imaginary and more a genuine possibility worth preparing for. And that, more than any single imagined statement, is the real story. A nation whose voice now carries far beyond its own borders, whether the world is ready for it or not.